Have you ever wondered how your favorite game keeps your high score saved? Or, how an online store remembers what's in your shopping cart? Well, it all boils down to one of the most basic, most important ideas in all of programming: how a computer actually stores information. Today, we're going to break down that exact building block in Java.
Right, so the magic behind all these things we take for granted is actually a pretty simple but really powerful idea. It's the key to how any program remembers anything at all. So let's pull back the curtain and see exactly how it works.
The answer is a variable. Now, don't let the technical terms scare you off. All it is really is a named container, kind of like a labeled box that lives inside the computer's memory. We can pop a piece of info into that box, like your score, and then just grab it again whenever we need it.
To really get this, we're going to lean on this simple analogy because it makes everything click. Just imagine that every variable is just a labeled box. If you can picture that, you're already halfway there.
Okay, so picture the computer's memory as this huge warehouse, just full of empty space. When you create a variable, all you're doing is grabbing an empty box off the shelf, writing a name on it with a marker, and then putting something inside. That's it. Seriously, that's the core idea.
So how do we actually make one of these labeled boxes? It's basically a three-step process. First, you have to choose the right kind of box for what you're storing. Next, you give that box a unique name so you can find it later in that giant warehouse. And finally, you put your item, your piece of information, inside it.
Now that first step, choosing the right kind of box, is super important in Java. And that brings us to our next big idea: data types. Let's figure out why this is a rule you just can't break in programming. I mean, it's a silly question, right? Of course not. A watermelon just isn't going to fit in a tiny little ring box. You need the right size and shape of container for the job. Well, believe it or not, programming follows that exact same logic.
This is why you'll hear people say that Java is a statically typed language. It just means that before you use any box, you have to tell the computer exactly what kind of stuff is going to go in it. Is it a box for numbers, a box for text? This rule is actually a good thing. It helps the computer catch your mistakes really early on.
So in Java, these data types basically come in two main flavors. We're not going to get lost in the weeds here, but it's really useful to know the difference between the two big families.
On one side, we have what are called primitive types. The best way to think of these is as your raw ingredients: a single number, a single letter. Super simple. The box literally holds that value. But on the other side, you've got reference types. These are more like a finished recipe that uses a bunch of different ingredients. The box doesn't hold the recipe itself, but just a little note that tells you where in memory to find it. For today, we're just going to focus on those fundamental building blocks, the primitive types.
All right, now that we're zeroing in on primitive types, let's pop open the toolbox and look at the most common ones you're going to use all the time as a programmer. These are actually really straightforward. If you need to store a whole number, like a score, you use an int. If you have a number with a decimal point, like a price tag, you'll use a double. For anything that's a simple yes or no, like checking if the game is over, you use a boolean. It can only be true or false. And for just a single letter or symbol, you use a char. These are the absolute workhorses of your programming toolkit. Okay, we've talked about the theory, the boxes, the labels, the types. Now let's see how this all clicks together in an actual line of Java code. This is where it all starts to make sense.
And there it is. That one little line of code does everything we've just talked about. It tells the computer, hey, create a new box, make sure it's the right type, slap this label on it, and put this specific thing inside. In programmer speak, this is called declaring and initializing a variable.
Let's break this down piece by piece. First, you see int. That's us telling Java what kind of box we need, one for whole numbers. Next, player score, well, that's the label we're writing on the box. The equal sign is the action. It's what puts the value into the box. 100 is the actual item we're storing inside. And that little semicolon at the end, that's just like a period at the end of a sentence. It tells Java, okay, this instruction is finished.
So if you're going to take away one thing, let it be this. If you think of programming as a language, then variables are the nouns, the things, and data types are the adjectives that describe those things. They are the absolute foundation you need to build, well, anything.
We've just gone over the most basic atoms of programming: numbers, single letters, and a simple true or false. It might seem almost too simple, but this is where it all begins. So the real question is, if these are the basic Lego bricks, what incredible things can we start to build?